Hello and welcome to another episode of Meanbrews. Today we're covering Irish Red Ale following on the Patreon series. Let's get right into the data. I found 32 winning Irish Red Ale recipes, 6 of which were best of show, lots of best of shows here. 12 gold, 4 silver, 3 bronze, and 7 really old ones that were award winning. The BJCP style number is 15A, an easy drinking pint, often with subtle flavors. Slightly malty in the balance, sometimes with an initial soft toffee caramel sweetness, a slightly grainy biscuity palate, and a touch of roasted dryness in the finish. When I looked at the stability over time, how it's evolving, very, very little evolution here. The style is staying right where it is. But there is a little bit of interpretation where people are taking their own ideas to this style. Looking right at the original gravity, well above the BJCP range. If you want to win in this style, you got to make a much bigger beer. The average was 1.052, and I'll be right under the average. That's because it's coming down a little bit, but I didn't present that one. IBUs, the range is 18 to 28 for BJCP, but the average was 25. We had a high one out here at 37 that won a medal. I'm going to be right at the mean here at 25. For the color, anywhere between 9 and 14 was the BJCP range, but the average was 15.4. On the darker side, I'm going to start putting the EBC in here as well for people that use that scale. In my recipe, I'm really shooting this is an important part of this style and getting the color right. It's in the name, right? Irish Red. So I will be adjusting my malts, my roasted malts, to get the color that I want for this style. Malt percentages, the average was 87.7% base malt, 8.1% crystal, 2.1% roast malt, and 1.1% each toast and adjunct. I'm looking for the recipes that use those malts. Base malt was anywhere between 73 and 97% of the grist. I'm going to be a little bit above the mean, right under 90% in my recipe. Again, looking closer at the specialty grains. The next most prominent was roast malt. 90% of the recipes use a roast malt, and about 87% used a crystal. Toast and adjuncts are lower on the scale here. I'll be using crystal at just under 10% of the grist and roast malt at 1.2, using whatever within this scale to get the color that you need. For the base malts, the most prominent was a Maris Otter or Golden Promise. 94% of the recipes, the majority of them use that as a base malt. The average was 77% of the grist. We had a whole slew of others, a couple recipes using Red X to get that color. None of these really stood out as ones that you need to use to get the style right. I'm going to be right at, again, 90% of the grist being Maris Otter. Crystal malts, this is where it kind of gets interesting. Most prominent was medium crystal, around crystal 60. 41% of the recipes used crystal 60 at an average of 8% of the grist. The next most common was a light crystal. 34% of the recipes, a third of the recipes use a light crystal at 6.3. I'm going to get a little bit trickier. I want to note here, if you look at the Special B, which is the yellow curve, and the dark crystal, it gets you up here in the same realm. So I'm going to include a dark crystal to give me some crystal complexity in this. So I'm going to start with a medium crystal right at around 4%, a little bit above 4%, and then a lighter crystal. I'm going to be around 3.5%, and then I am going to use a dark crystal just to round it out at a little bit above 1%, almost 2% of the grist. And the reason why I selected these proportions was it gives me the overall crystal percentage per the Meanbrews, and also when I normalized what the Lovibond contribution of the crystal malts was, I get this curve. So I proportionalized each recipe, and I came up with an average of 57 Lovibond crystal. Does that mean you can just use the crystal 60 malt if you want to? Absolutely. However, I think you get more complexity if you distribute that out proportionally to the 3 or 4 different crystal malts. My recipe is going to be right on there, right at 56. Toasted malts, nothing really stood out, but the most common was surprisingly special roast, just about 13% of the grist. And then we had some others here that just were in 1 or 2 recipes each, or 3 for the biscuit. Roasted malts, roasted barley is the roast malt you should use for this style. We had 59% of the recipes use a roasted barley, and an average of 2% of the grist. Most we had was a brown malt here at 5%, but this 1 to 2% seems to be the sweet spot for the roast malts, just to get that color. And I'm going to be at about 1.2, I believe, with roasted barley. Adjuncts, we had 3 flake malts used: flake corn, flake barley, and flaked oats. And then we had some honey used. Again, the sweet spot somewhere around 6 to 8% of the grist if you're going to use an adjunct. I am not going to use an adjunct in my recipe. We had 12 different bittering hops used. EKG, the most prominent, followed by Fuggles. So about 50% of them British style, while we have Challenger over here in Target. I'll be using EKG to bitter this beer. Flavor hops, the vast majority were English, either Fuggles or EKG. We had 5 different ones. I am not going to use a flavor hop for this style, and I'll show you in a second why. Aroma hops, we had 5 different aroma hops used. EKG and Fuggle, again, 2/3 of the aroma hops used. I'll be using EKG. When looking at the rate of hop addition, you might be surprised I'm not using a flavor hop when half the recipes used a flavor hop and only a little bit over 1/3 used an aroma hop. These ranges are pretty big, and you can see some people hopped it very highly at the end to get some more hop character. 50% of the recipes use flavor hops at 0.12 ounce per gallon average, 38% at 0.17 for the aroma hops. And again, I'm going to use an aroma hop right at this mean. And the reason I dropped the flavor is we're seeing a big trend here to drop the flavor addition and more push those hops towards the tail end of the boil, which I'm going to follow, and which is why you see that in my recipe. Not only was the flavor hop dropping in the number of recipes using, but the recipes that are using a flavor hop, the amount they're using is less and less. So clear trend to me to drop the flavor hop from this style. The mash types, vast majority, we only had 1 step mash. The rest were single infusion, and I'll be using a single infusion. Here are the rest. We had that 1 step mash with the beta rest at 144 or 62 Celsius for 10 minutes. I'm not sure what they're trying to do here, 10 minutes, but I reported it anyways. Main saccharification rest, the average was 153 Fahrenheit, very close range between 148 and 155, and I'll be right in the mean. There's no movement here on this variable. Boil duration, 60 to 90, with a bias towards the 60. Average was 65 minutes, and I'll be sticking with a 1-hour boil. For the yeasts, we had 7 different yeasts used. The Guinness strain was the most prominent. 2/3 of the recipes used Guinness. The next most common was the Chico strain. Interesting there. And then some other British and American styles of yeasts used. This one, 1278. I think this is the Scottish strain, but they wrote 1278, so I put that down, but I think that's the Scottish ale strain. Yeah, and I'll be using the Guinness strain here. Water chemistry, big ranges here on water chemistry. The average was 96 calcium, 4 magnesium, 38 sodium, 82 sulfate, and 92 chlorides. So pretty balanced, but kind of hard water. And I'm going to be at 60 parts per million of calcium. I'm not going to add any magnesium. Right under the mean on sodium, and then right on the means for both chloride and sulfate. Fermentation temperatures, we had a range between 62.5 and 68, and the Guinness strain kind of followed that curve. Didn't go as low as the others. The average was 66 Fahrenheit or 19 Celsius. I'm going to be at 65 because we're seeing that trend down as well. So the starting fermentation temperature for this style is trending down to the lower, mid to lower 60s rather than the upper 60s, making a cleaner beer. Carbonation volumes, the average was 2.25, and the average mash pH was 5.5. Now, on to the Meanbrews recipe. I'm going to start again with 89.5 or 90% Maris Otter or Golden Promise. These are the 3 crystals that I've chosen here. That's the wrong color there. Anyway, Crystal 60, 4.6%, Crystal 45, 3.4, and then a Crystal 75. That should be 75 at 1.3. I'll fix that in the Brew Father recipe. Roasted barley at 1.2% to get that color. Check your Lovibond here. You may need to adjust this based upon the color of the roasted barley you're able to purchase. Color is very important for this style. We're going to bitter with EKG at 60 minutes with about 21 IBUs, and then I'm going to put 0.17 ounce per gallon or 1.27 grams per liter of EKG in at 5 minutes before flame out. My yeast I'm going to use is a Guinness strain. I forgot to put that here. I'm going to shoot for an original gravity of 1.050 and 25 IBUs. Here is the water chemistry that I reported just previously. Mash pH 5.5. I'm going to do an infusion mash at 153 Fahrenheit or 67 Celsius for an hour. Sparge and boil for another hour. Chill it to 63 Fahrenheit or 17 Celsius and pitch if you're doing a 5-gallon batch, a 2-liter starter of the Guinness strain. Let it rise up to 65 Fahrenheit or 18 Celsius. And when it gets close to finishing, raise it up another 3 degrees to let it finish out. Transfer it to a bottle or keg and carbonate to 2.25 volumes of CO2. And that's it for a very simple style and a very simple recipe. The next style we're going to cover is the last one on the Patreon series. It's going to be English IPA. So a style I'm very familiar with and I've done well with in competition. So looking forward to see you. It'll be about a week before I get the next video out. Thanks for tuning in. And don't forget, you can purchase this kit. It's already up at Bacchus and Barleycorn. Turnkey, everything you need to make this Meanbrews beer. Thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.